Okay. Wow. Wow. Welcome. And I'm saying wow because this is one of those days where I'm literally baffled about where to begin. And I don't want to, I don't want to record a 3 hour, episode here. There's just so much to cover. So I'm just going to be able to touch on a few key things here. Now, let me state this for the interview that I'm running today. I believe we'll be able to run this. It's my interview with Michael Yon, and I believe it's Steve Murray on Coffee and a Mic. That's Michael Ferris. Now, this interview, that is, if we are able to run it today, and I hope we are, I think we are, this interview it's bombshell, it's hard hitting, and I would only say the one thing that would make it better is if I wasn't in it and instead Matt Bracken were in it, because then I could sit back and listen to those three geniuses explain what's going on and I wouldn't have to think about what to say. No, I'm serious. I am so impressed with Matt Bracken that I would rather Matt Bracken be in that interview than me. And, I did an interview recently with Matt Bracken and Michael Yon, and that has already become, very, very widely shared and widely respected. And I'm Michael Yon's going on with Alex Jones every few days, or Rex Jones, and Matt Bracken is on with Daniel Davis, and he's on with Mario Nawfal, or Nafal, I think. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. Bracken is making the rounds, man. And so is like Brandon Weichert, who I also interviewed. So is Michael Yon. And I gotta say, like, none of this is coordinated. This is all organic. It's just that the message that you're hearing from these people, and I guess you might include me in some of these, the message is just resonating with people right now at a level that wasn't happening before. And the thing about Matt Bracken that just always astonishes me, he's a very accomplished author. He's a great writer, and he writes about, he wrote about like civil war in America, tyrannical government cracking down on its own citizens, things like that. But he's written a lot of other books as well. The thing about Matt Bracken is that in order to be a writer of those topics, you have to brainstorm every possible scenario. You have to think about what could happen and then do a lot of research and figure it out and then write it up in a book in a way that is compelling and authentic and doesn't make you look like an idiot who doesn't know anything about the military. Of course, Matt Bracken is a former Navy SEAL. He knows a lot about logistics and military and strategy. Anyway, as a result of this, Matt Bracken is able to come up with scenarios that are suddenly very plausible, like suddenly make a lot of sense. I'll give you an example here, but these are scenarios that I didn't think of at all. But I don't have a military history like Bracken does. But one of the things that Bracken is warning about right now, I heard him say this on with Daniel Davis, who's also a veteran of the U.S. Army, Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis. I've been on his show as well. But Bracken was saying that Iran is now able to really target U.S. planes and stratotankers that are sitting on the tarmac, specifically on the tarmac at military bases in Jordan, but also potentially in Israel. And what's happening right now is that America is, the U.S. military has been defeated and is retreating. And has retreated from most of the Persian Gulf. And that's why they've retreated back to Jordan and Israel, for the most part. Colonel Douglas McGregor, who's another very wise voice that you should listen to, he says that America is in a rear guard retreat, or a rear guard action. That's the term, a rear guard action, which is a fighting retreat. And he's right. And what Matt Bracken says is that Iran is simply waiting for the U.S. to launch a major assault wave, putting a lot of planes in the air, for a bombing wave on Iran. And remember that Israel and Jordan are very far away from Iran, so it's many hours in the air with a lot of refueling that has to take place before those planes arrive. So during that time, Iran can just launch a wave of ballistic missiles that destroy all the runways at all the air bases that the U.S. controls in Jordan, in Israel, and plus if there's any air bases anywhere else, like, Kuwait or Iraq that the U.S. could still control, Iran could potentially bomb those runways too, even in other countries like UAE, etc. And what would that cause? It would mean that all those airborne U.S. planes and tankers have nowhere to land, or at least nowhere close by. I mean, nowhere within range. And some of those planes might have to be abandoned. That is, you fly them as far as you can until they run out of fuel, and then you jettison, and the plane is lost. It's gone. The plane hits the ground and blows up. Or you might have to fly them to other bases farther away, and now you've screwed up the whole schedule. And then those planes have to be relocated back to the original bases, but those bases have blown up runways. You see? Or, and Matt Bracken predicted this, and he did so accurately, the bases in Jordan that the U.S. currently uses, which the Jordanian people are not happy about this, by the way. They're telling the U.S., get the hell out of our country because you're making us a big, fat, juicy target, obviously, which is true. But Iran can just launch these cluster munitions. They're ballistic missiles that unleash then a cluster of bomblets, I guess would be the right way to say that. Anywhere from 30 to 80 smaller bombs. And as Bracken explains, these appear to be designed intentionally to just lay waste to airplanes sitting on a tarmac or in airplane shelters. And wouldn't you know it, Iran is now claiming, although you will never hear this in the Western press, this will never be admitted by CENTCOM or the White House or Trump or the Pentagon or anybody. Iran is now claiming that they did this, and they blew up and destroyed 3 F-35s and damaged 3 more F-35s, taking 6 F-35s completely out of service. Now, I don't have any way to verify that, so I don't know if that's true. But I know that if it were true, nobody would admit it in America. That's for sure. And it's plausible. The technology to do that is something that Iran has. Clearly, they've demonstrated it with ballistic missile attacks on Israel and other targets, clearly. And also, the United States military is run by leaders who are dumb enough to park all the planes right next to each other on a tarmac right out in the open where they can be destroyed by bomblets from an incoming missile. And on top of that, remember that all of the U.S. radar installations that used to be able to see thousands of kilometers, literally, they're gone because Iran took those out with drones and missiles, including that, what was it, $1 billion radar installation? I think it was in Bahrain. It's gone. It's been gone for a few months now. So the U.S. is blind. They can't even see incoming missiles. And Iran has missiles that are very accurate that can hit targets on the ground. So when the U.S. is parking planes on the ground like the strato tankers and the F-35s, and then Iran gets a hold of near real-time satellite imagery, Iran's already got the GPS coordinates of all those airfields and everything. Iran just hits launch. It's just like, fire away, and the side of the mountain opens up like a James Bond movie, the ballistic missiles shoot out of the mountain from like 500 meters below, protected by granite. and then those missiles, they cruise and America has no idea it's happening, no radar, totally blind. And then by the time America's near range radar can actually see this stuff coming in, by that time, the missiles are only like 100 kilometers away or something like that. And you've got, I don't know, I'm just estimating, like you've got like 3 minutes or whatever it is, depending on the speed, etc., depending on the range. But you've got minutes. In fact, Trump said this. He admitted this the other day. Like, our troops only had minutes. It was a surprise attack. He admitted that. Well, of course it was a surprise attack. Iran took out your radar. I mean, almost every attack that the U.S. launched against Iran was a surprise attack. Surprise bombings, surprise assassinations of your negotiators, surprise killing of the Ayatollah. That was a U.S. surprise attack. And Israel specializes in surprise attacks, exploding pagers, surprise, So, of course, Iran is going to destroy the planes on the tarmac. And then the question becomes, well, how can the U.S. even amass the number of planes necessary to run a bombing raid? To run I guess, is it still called a sortie? A sortie? I don't know if they use that term anymore, but a sortie or a wave of air assaults. You're going to have to collect a bunch of planes and on a few runways, you're going to have to build up your planes and your strato tankers. Iran's going to see that because Iran clearly has access to satellite imagery that's probably being handed to them by some other, BRICS nation. And it may be real time or it may be near real time, like 60 seconds old or whatever, or 5 minutes old. And Iran is able to react to that. So Iran is calling the shots. Just like I said, in the game of chess, if you were to compare it to chess, Iran is the player that's initiating the attacks, and the U.S. is the player that's reacting. The U.S. is on the wrong side of the OODA loop, as it's called. OODA, the OODA loop. The U.S. is reacting, and the U.S. is retreating, and the U.S. is trying to preserve its assets, including its bases and its aircraft and its, HIMARS systems and Patriot systems. And frankly, it's losing on every front. Iran is expanding its range, its reach, its accuracy. And this insane dream of Trump that, we're going to control the Strait of Hormuz. It's ours. We're going to charge the tolls. The world's going to pay us to use the strait. He literally said that. That's such a distant pipe dream. You'd have to be smoking crack to believe it. When you can't even get your military assets even as close as, Kuwait anymore without them getting all blowed up, you see. So how are you going to control the strait? It's not going to happen. The U.S. has lost. And any desperate, lurching maneuver that they try to pursue at this point, let's airdrop, 20,000 troops from parachutes onto Karg Island, whatever. It's going to be a suicide mission. Just total, straight up military suicide. Because even if thousands of soldiers parachute into Karg Island or arrive on choppers or whatever, that's going to become an artillery magnet like the world has never seen before. It's going to be, artillery and drones and missiles coming at you nonstop, blowing up your foxholes or wherever you think you're safe. You're not safe. It's going to blow the snot out of everybody and everything on that island. They'll be lucky to scrape DNA off of the rocks eventually on that island if the U.S. is dumb enough to land troops there. They'll have to do DNA analysis. Was this an American? They'll send it off to the, 23andMe and it'll come back. No, it's like 97% lizard or whatever, because those DNA tests are always a fraud anyway. So there is literally no military solution for the United States in this conflict. And that's why many of us, I've seen many other people conclude that at this point, it's clear the United States of America has been defeated by Iran. It was a failed war. And at this point, everything that Trump tries to do is just going to make the quagmire even deeper and swampier and much more difficult to walk away from. Although ultimately, that's the only way out of this, is to walk away from it. And the question is, how much reputational damage is Trump doing to America and to the military and to his own so-called legacy and to the GOP, etc.? This is truly, it's bizarre. It would be like, some skinny punk kid picking a fight with Mike Tyson in his prime, you know? I'm going to fight you, Mike, you know? And what's the saying from Mike Tyson? I think I have it right. Everybody has a plan until you get punched in the mouth. Right? That's a Mike Tyson quote, I'm pretty sure. You're like, I'm going to beat you, Mike, you know? And then Mike Tyson starts pounding you in the face with his ultra strong, you know, I don't know how many foot-pounds of energy is imparted, but it's enough to break most people's faces, that's for sure. And in this case, it would be Trump's face, and Trump is like taking punches from Mike Tyson, which in this case is a metaphor for Iran. I don't know that Mike Tyson himself wants to be compared, but I'm making a loose comparison here to explain the situation. Trump is getting a pounding in the face, and he keeps saying, no, we're going to win. That Mike Tyson wants to negotiate. You know, he's losing. We've destroyed him. and Mike Tyson's like, oh, so you want to fight some more? Oh, you want another round? Okay. Well, I can keep punching. That's where we are in this. Trump probably is too ignorant to realize that he's lost. And so, unfortunately, American soldiers are going to pay the price for that in blood, probably, as Trump keeps trying insane, stupid, suicidal things, you know, like landing troops or whatever. You know, they already tried that. They landed a bunch of troops, special forces in the desert to try to capture the nuclear material. And that whole thing went south. A bunch of soldiers got lit up and killed, and airplanes were burned up or hit with artillery while they were on the ground in the desert. And so the Pentagon and Fox News had to spin some story. Oh, this was a rescue. We were rescuing a downed pilot. Yeah. No, you weren't. You ran a failed raid. You were trying to go in and capture the nuclear material and haul it out of there, and you got caught, and you got a bunch of your guys killed, and a bunch of planes destroyed, etc. Total failure, but they had to, make up a fake story about it. And remember, I don't remember exactly what week this was, but remember when we were told that I think it was a B-2 stealth bomber crashed after takeoff in the continental United States? Was that flying out of a base in California or somewhere? And we were told that it started to take off and then it crashed. And we were shown a video of a giant fireball, but there were no plane parts on the ground after that. Nothing, actually. It just looked like they'd set grass on fire with a bunch of gasoline and set off like a gas bomb for a show or something. There were no plane parts, no landing gear, not a scrap of metal was found there, because it wasn't a B-2 stealth bomber that crashed there. It's very clear to me that what actually happened was a B-2 stealth bomber got shot down over Iran or, Kuwait or somewhere like that. And all the crew were killed and the plane was lost. And the Pentagon just couldn't admit it because all they can do is lie constantly. So they had to stage a fake crash in America to explain away why all the crew died. And then they could tell, the loved ones or the parents of the crew members. I think it was 8 crew members, I think, or 6 or 8. I forgot the exact number, but they could tell their loved ones, oh, they died in a training accident. No, they didn't. They died. They got shot down. They got shot down and killed by Iran, or maybe IRGC militia operating out of Iraq, for example, possibly, something like that is what really happened. So think about it. The U.S. has to stage fake crashes in America to cover up the truth that they're getting shot down over the Persian Gulf. I mean, talk about Orwellian, And by the way, at this point, hundreds of U.S. troops have already been killed. Hundreds of them, but you're not going to be told that. You're told outright lies. What's the official number now? It was like 18, that they even lowered that to 14 or 15 or something. They probably lowered again. It's like, no, it was only 9. The number keeps going lower somehow. What does that tell you? They're just lying. I mean, it's shameless lying. 3 months from now, after like 5,000 soldiers die on Karg Island or some other, misadventure, we'll probably be told only 2 people died. Something like that. Because that's just the level of lying. But the truth is, the American military is being decimated. The Navy, neutralized. Air Force, getting the snot blown out of it. Air defense systems, running out of munitions. Army, what can you do? You can't. What are you going to do? March in there across the desert? You're going to march across Saudi Arabia, Good luck. It's a quagmire. Meanwhile, the whole world suffers from the shortage of oil, the shortage of helium, the shortage of sulfuric acid, fertilizer, all these things we talked about, the shortage of liquefied gas, etc. The whole world suffers. And Trump doesn't seem to give a crap at all. And he's got no way out. He's got no strategy. And, Hegseth is an idiot, just an actual low IQ moron. So he doesn't know anything about how to fight a war and win it. This is going to go down in history as a lesson for some of the dumbest military decisions ever made in the history of all militaries on Earth. You could take the dumbest military maneuver currently found in the history books. This is going to top that. It's going to be right up there, number 1. The Trump Hegseth invasion or attempted overthrow of Iran 2026. What went wrong? Full analysis. Here goes like all the paragraphs. What went wrong? Dumbass decisions, failed. No strategy. Our shit don't work. Just on and on and on. All these reasons why it failed. And at the end of the day, the only people who are going to think that America won this war are the people dumb enough to still be watching Fox News and believing what they see there. Because they're living in an alternate reality there. Watching, Jesse Waters, who's like, we're winning every day. It's like, and Sean Hannity in a deep state proxy mouthpiece, just shameless propagandists and shills for the warmongers and the neocons who are losing every single day. It's pathetic, actually. It's a total clown show. So the bottom line on this is all of you listening who are Americans, and myself included, we need to be ready for a much more difficult, economic environment on the geopolitical stage because of how Trump is destroying America's credibility and defaulting on America's projection of power, or the credibility of our projection of power. This is going to result in an acceleration of the global abandonment of the dollar. And that's going to make life more difficult for all Americans because we won't be able to just, print currency and sell it to other countries in exchange for their goods. The American people are actually going to have to, make more of their own stuff and trade with each other more domestically because fewer and fewer international partners will obediently bow down to the coercive threats of the U.S. military. Because the military, as I predicted, you heard me talk about this, and I had articles about this in March of this year. The U.S. military is a paper tiger. And the mistake that Trump made is revealing the paper tiger nature to the rest of the world. If he hadn't started the war, the rest of the world might have continued to assume that the U.S. military was very strong and it could strike fear into the hearts of nations all over the world. Now, Trump has shown that it's just a paper tiger. There's a saying in American culture that's typically attributed to Mark Twain, although it's doubtful he actually said this. But anyway, it's a popular saying. It goes like this: better to remain silent and be thought a fool than to speak and remove all doubt. Right? That's what Trump did. Our military was feared. Not so much anymore. You think Russia is afraid of a military that could not even control the Strait of Hormuz? No. Russia has zero fear of the U.S. military. And of course, zero fear of the British military, which almost doesn't exist. And you think China is afraid of the U.S. military after all this? No. I mean, come on. What a joke. China has zero fear. Do you think China is afraid of the U.S. Navy, that the Navy might protect Taiwan from China, and the U.S. Navy might make it impossible for China to do what it wants in the Strait of Taiwan and that whole region of the West Pacific? You think China's afraid of the U.S. Navy? Not a chance. If anything, what Iran proved is that China has the capability to sink every U.S. Navy surface vessel practically around the world in like 20 or 30 minutes. The entire U.S. Navy could be destroyed and decimated by one country alone. That's China. Not to mention ships that are within shore missile range of the east coast of mainland China. Those ships wouldn't last even 20 minutes. They'd be gone. You know, the U.S. Navy is a floating theater. I don't know what's the right way to say it. It's a floating mirage of power. It's a throwback to the days when aircraft carriers were the unrivaled beasts of the sea. You know, there was a day like that when armored soldiers in medieval Europe, they could not be defeated by any common person. If you had a suit of armor and you're walking around as if you're strong enough to walk around in a very heavy, probably extremely hot suit of armor, basically nobody could touch it because the arrows would bounce right off your armor. You know, people couldn't get you with pitchforks or whatever little garden tools they had, like trying to whack you with a hoe. You know, your armor, it would just bounce right off of that. If you had a suit of armor back in those days, you were like a walking Goliath among everyday people. Now, that changed with the crossbow, where the bolts were powerful enough to penetrate the armor. Oops. But before that day, if you were walking around in a suit of armor, you were like the god of the battlefield. But those days ended. Today, you know, an AR-15 just blows right through medieval armor. It's not even, it's just effortless. Oh, we're ventilating the night, you know? Does it feel cooler in there now with the holes? You thought you only had holes in your visor. We put some holes in the torso area for you there so you could breathe better. Same thing with aircraft carriers, you know. In the 1940s and 1950s, the aircraft carrier was the undefeatable Goliath of the seas. Nothing could touch it because nobody had ballistic missiles with that kind of accuracy. You couldn't really fire artillery at aircraft carriers. You know, the carrier could stay far enough offshore. That's not possible. You know, there were no drones. And for most of the decades, nobody even had satellite imagery that was accurate enough to know where the carriers even were. You know, you could sneak up on a shore with an aircraft carrier, you know, 3 football fields long, and you could sneak up. Not today. There's no sneaking around a battlefield. There's no sneaking. Every nation knows where everything is. Oh, there's your tanks, there's your troops, there's your ships, there's your airplanes. They're parked on the tarmac. Oh, let's lay waste to those, by the way. They're taking up tarmac space, you know. Nobody's hiding anything. And Iran can reach everything. China can reach everything. Russia can reach everything with Oreshniks and Kinzhals. You know, I mean, not the whole world, but they've got a lot of range. And what are the other ones? Oh, the Iskanders. Iskander. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but it's kind of a fun name. The Iskander. Those things have long range, and they can carry nukes, too. You know, Russia can hit any U.S. base anywhere in the world, or any European base, or any U.S. ship anywhere in the world, and so can China. And Iran is proving that it's very capable. And in fact, the Houthis can hit stuff. Have you noticed that? The Houthis are blowing up Saudi refineries and ships in the Red Sea and hitting, the Ben Gurion airport in Israel, etc. If the Houthis can hit stuff with accuracy like that, I mean, folks, it's game over. I mean, warfare has changed forever. The battleship is history. The aircraft carrier is history. The knight in shining armor is history. What do you have left? Well, if you're smart, you just GTFU out of the Persian Gulf. You just get out. Go home. If you're America, go home. Get out. You want the strait to reopen? Leave. And it's just Trump is just too bullheaded and ignorant to realize this. He doesn't know when he's been defeated, which is not a good trait. So the bottom line is, life is going to get difficult. Make sure you stay prepared. And along those lines, you can, of course, find products at our store, healthrangerstore.com, should you choose to have clean foods and support our operation at the same time. Lab-tested, certified organic, long-term storable foods, including freeze-dried fruits in number 10 steel cans. That's what's missing from most people's stored food supplies. They don't have fruit. They're going to become vitamin C deficient, But we've got all that and more at healthrangerstore.com, including iodine supplements, plus turmeric and all kinds of amazing things there. And our sponsor, the Satellite Phone Store, has preparedness or survival items, including Faraday bags that protect your electronics from, EMP effects or nuclear. The EMP effects of nuclear detonations is one thing, but also solar flares. And they've also got satellite phones that can be life-saving if the local cell towers don't work or the local power grid is down. They've got great satellite phones. They've got power stations. They offer them with solar packages so you can have your own power even if you're off-grid or if the grid's down, which could very easily happen, especially if this war escalates. Sadly, it looks like that's where it's going. So check out the Satellite Phone Store at sat123.com or SAT123.com. And my online store, again, healthrangerstore.com. Now, I'm praying for peace. I don't want to see anybody suffer. I don't want to see any blood spilled for these insane, lunatic, globalist leaders and deranged politicians and neocons and warmongers and the ghost of Lindsey freaking Graham. I don't want to see blood spilled for any of these lunatics. So I want peace. I want the soldiers to come home. I want America to invest in America. Let's put America first. Wasn't that the campaign promise anyway? Come on. So join me in calling for peace and say no to escalation. Otherwise, we all suffer. We all will suffer in ways that aren't even apparent yet to a lot of people. Rising food prices, diesel fuel scarcity coming up, right? Supply chain collapse. Yeah, it's not going to be a pretty picture, not even in America or Canada or, Western countries. It's not going to be good. If we don't have peace, we don't have global trade. We don't have global trade, a lot of things break down. And you can't print your way out of it by printing more currency, although they will try. They will try. They'll flood you with, counterfeit dollars. It's like, everything's good. You don't need diesel. Like, stick this in your gas tank and burn dollars. Doesn't work. You have to have the diesel, right? Okay. You can follow more of my work at brightvideos.com, and also my articles are at naturalnews.com. I'm Mike Adams, the Health Ranger, and thank you for listening. Take care.
Stock up on the long-term storable Ranger Bucket Set. 536 servings of clean organic superfoods for your survival pantry. Certified organic and lab-tested for purity. Order now at healthrangerstore.com.